لك Noura, we're live now.
Hi, and welcome to our DCPFAF community and audience. We are so excited to have you here. We just got off the airwaves with Kojo Namdi, who is a national treasure, and we are excited that the DCPFAF has become part of that legacy as well. And today, to expand our repertoire, we're so honored to welcome my dear friend, compa, visionary, social entrepreneur. I know that's a bad word in some circles, but really is a creative and a creator, filmmaker, Rami Younis. Let me give you the hi, Rami.
Hi, Noura. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to be in a conversation with you. We've been talking about this. We've been talking about this for years, and finally, it's happening.
Yes. Actually, the last time we talked about this, Rami and I were at Harvard, where he was a fellow last year. I'm going to read your official bio, but let me just, this quick story. He was a fellow at Harvard, and I was invited, and we had an epic throwdown with an Israeli
Designers.
who wanted to know, a former soldier who wanted to know if he would be prosecuted for war crimes. And we said, yeah, probably. And so thank you for changing the culture at Harvard, and for also changing culture.
Well, you did that. No, you did that. That was all you. I was just like, you made it sound like I did it, or I was a part of it. I was just in the audience, like cheering you. But yeah, you did that. But yeah, I think we can say that the wind is shifting in academia and in these Ivy League schools, and people are willing to hear about Palestine more now, more than ever now. And I think that it's due to also some of the work you've been doing, Noura.
Well, yeah. That's why we're in this together and collaborating, because part of the work has actually been creating a critical mass at Harvard, right? And creating a critical mass in places, and making it so that when we talk about Palestine, it's not such a big deal, but is actually, you know, doesn't have to be a fight every single time. So with that, let me introduce the audience to you, Rami, formally, so that we can get into how you've been doing that through the Palestine Music Expo. Rami Younis is a Palestine writer and a cultural activist from Linden. He is one of the founders of the Palestinian activist group Khutweh, which was active on the issues of home demolitions and Palestinian identities in Linden and Ramla, Jewish Arab cities in occupied Palestine. Rami served as a parliamentary consultant and spokesperson for the Palestinian member of the Knesset, Hanin Zughbi. He co-founded Zughbi. He co-founded Local Call, a Hebrew news. This is like probably reminiscent of your work for her when people messed up her name. He founded Local Call, a Hebrew news in Palestine and Israel, where he served as a writer and an editor, and also wrote for the English sister site Plus 972 magazine. He's also a co-founder and manager of the Palestine Music Expo, an event that connects the Palestinian music scene to the worldwide industry. Rami is currently co-directing and producing a sci-fi documentary film called Linden Exile. Most recently, he was a visiting fellow at Harvard Divinity School for the 2019-2020 academic year. An impressive resume, Rami. Welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Again, thank you for having me.
Yes. So now what I wanted you to do was to tell the audience a little bit more about what the Palestine Music Expo is. Just give us an overview. You all were founded in 2017, how you've brought the community together, what your the project was, and then we'll move into a space where I get to ask you a bunch of questions.
Yeah. So since we're talking about the politics of curation in Palestine, we should start with the Palestine Music Expo, a project that was co-founded by Palestinian musicians, activists, cultural activists such as myself, with British partnership. And we're very proud of this British partnership because we couldn't have done this alone. In 2017, we identified the need of Palestinian musicians because we were like, I don't know. It just happened that it just so happens that a lot of my friends are musicians. So I know this world. I'm not a musician myself, but I know about the struggles and about what they have to go through. Each time a musician, a Palestinian musician, wants to produce an album, it's just it's a nightmare for them. They have to come up with the money, and there is no infrastructure for an industry in Palestine. So it's just it's a massive burden on them. So we decided to try and connect with the worldwide music industry through a music expo. We figured that we would just showcase Palestinian musicians, the Palestinian musical acts on stage in one place. And when I say Palestinian musicians, I mean Palestinians from 48, people such as myself, Palestinian citizens of Israel, and people from 67. And we would bring delegates, we call them delegates, internationals from the music industry. And that way we just like connect the two worlds together. And this is how we figured we can breach that gap between us and the world. Because up till 1948, Palestine was very important in the Middle East cultural scene, also in music. And people don't know that. So what we want to do is bring that focus back on the Palestinian musicians. Now, when I say cultural activism, I don't just mean exporting our music to European, American, or Asian stages. I also mean bringing delegates from the music industry and showing them what it's like to live under occupation and to be able to create and to be creative under occupation. So we take them to refugee camps, we show them the wall, we give them the whole experience of what it means to be a Palestinian. And each and every year we come up with crazy, unique stories with the delegates. We were able to bring some really big names in the past, and we will be able to bring, once COVID is over, big names and influential names from the industry in the future. In 2018, we had Rami Younis, the legendary producer and musician, basically a god in the music world, to participate in the expo. PMX 2018, we were able to bring James Ford, who's the producer of the Arctic Monkeys, Depeche Mode, Florence and the Machine, The Killers, gigantic legendary bands. And he came to see Palestinian musicians, and he learned about the occupation through that. We were called the most extreme music event by a lot of delegates. We were called the most extreme music event in the world. Just to give you a little taste to why they call us that, in 2018, we're having a tour in Hebron. During the day, before we do the showcases at night in Ramallah, but during the day we either have like workshops with professionals from the music industry, or we take them on tours to see what Palestine is really like. One day in 2018, we took them to Hebron, and as a lot of our viewers probably know, Hebron is not an easy place to be in. It's the place you go to learn about apartheid and what apartheid really means. So an Israeli settler didn't like us there, and he tried to run us over with his car. So you know, people from the music industry go to festivals, go to conferences all over the world. These type of things don't happen in other places. These things happen in Palestine. I mean, when you have a tour in Colombia, a refugee camp, with Salik, a group of rappers, and the delegates see the posters of martyrs all around them, and then they go to the Salik's very modest studio, and it really impresses them to see how these guys are able to create under these unbearable circumstances. And you know, so this is us basically showing the world why we can, what it means to be under occupation. But it's very important also to emphasize that we are not victimizing ourselves. The Palestine Music Expo isn't about victimizing ourselves. Isn't about telling the world, look, we don't have an infrastructure for an industry. We don't have music venues to do live music. We don't have radio stations to play our music. We don't have producers, label companies, whatever, the whole thing. We don't have it because of the occupation. But what we're trying to do, actively reach out to the world and create these things. And the PMX, basically, PMX is short for Palestine Music Expo, is us trying to communicate with the world directly to bridge that gap, over that gap. Yeah.
I have so many questions just based on that. But before we do that, we want to show a short video. You all have been featured in multiple mainstream media outlets, including PBS NewsHour, Scene Noise, Resident Advisor, Celebrity Access, and Billboard. So we want to show one clip from PBS NewsHour about PMX.
The Palestinian West Bank is usually discussed around the world in regard to Middle East peace talks. But for the past few years, the organizers of a music festival there have been trying to encourage people to open their minds and ears to what Palestinian artists have to offer. John Yang gives us a firsthand look. It's part of our ongoing series on arts and culture, Canvas.
In a city surrounded by barriers, this music festival is breaking down walls.
We are connecting Palestine to the rest of the world using music. That's exactly what we do. If you want to describe PMX in one sentence, that's what we do. Every year since...
Rami Younis is the co-founder of the 3-year-old Palestine Music Expo, or PMX, held in the Palestinian West Bank. It's as much about sharing stages as it is about shattering stereotypes.
This is us trying to tell the world that Palestine isn't just Gaza, occupation, soldiers, checkpoints, and all that. Palestine is also music. Palestine is also cinema. Palestine is also other stuff. And people don't see that. And you know what? We're not victims in here. We're not victimizing ourselves.
The Israeli network of fences, walls, and checkpoints, which Israel says keeps it safe, restricts the flow not only of people, but also of culture.
All I need in this life is to be free from this cage, but I need a key.
The rap group Edajah is made up of 4 young women who grew up in a refugee camp in Bethlehem. Diala Shaheen says they're challenging the status quo of Israeli control of the West Bank.
I mean, we suffer through the occupation at the end of the day. We decided to rap because it is a peaceful way to cope. We like rap because it is a way to express ourselves, and to express ourselves and everything that's happened to us as young women, as refugees. We experience occupation every day.
The group recently released a music video for their song Bala Hadood, Arabic for Without Walls.
We experience difficulties, especially because of the checkpoints when we try to leave Palestine. These checkpoints make us feel like we are not living with freedom. We don't have the freedom where we can leave from the airport, from Palestine to other countries.
Their lyrics take cues from civil rights movements around the world.
2018 and look at me, still protesting, free Palestine, still screaming, Black Lives Matter, and people say مش نفس الصعوبات اللي بنواجهها بس.
It's not the same problems that we experience, but rap did begin with the African American community, and they use it as a way to express and to share with people.
The racism they face.
Right, and we're doing the same thing through rap. We're expressing our problems and everything we face.
I want to learn.
PMX was Edajah's biggest gig to date. About 700 people were here, including some supportive Israelis. The group hopes to build on their warm reception. The festival brings international music industry insiders to the West Bank to expose them to Palestinian artists. Larry LeBlanc is a longtime music journalist.
The music they're making here is extremely exportable. It's commercial. It would work in a number of different formats. A good artist is a good artist.
When we bring the delegates from the worldwide music industry, real heavyweights, we also ask them to have workshops with us, and we learn from the good stuff they've done and from the mistakes they've done. We're not trying to copy the rest of the world. We are building our own thing based on their experience.
Festival organizers take the visiting music industry insiders around the West Bank to show them what Palestinians' daily lives are like behind Israel's separation barrier. LeBlanc has been going on those tours and attending the festival since the first PMX.
One of the big problems of the Middle East period, or musicians say they're Palestinian based, are either based in Israel proper or one of the other areas, of course, is getting out of the country and playing.
Palestinians from the Gaza Strip can't cross Israel to the West Bank without an Israeli permit. These Gaza musicians couldn't get permits, so while their bandmates played PMX, they surprised them on Skype. PMX and the delegates who meet here help bring Palestinian artists to the international stage. Organizers say at least 7 of the featured bands have performed in international festivals, like the all-female band Kalami. Kalami features 2 Israeli-born Palestinian women and 2 Swiss women of Palestinian descent. They first worked together in Ramallah as a kind of musical exchange program. But vocalist Mesa Daw said after their first collaboration, the band stuck.
It was actually supposed to be a one-time show, but we fell in love and we decided to keep going.
Vocalist Jasmine Albash says the women of Kalami are not just sharing their music with the world, they're sharing a more complete representation of what this isolated land and its people have to offer.
The beautiful thing is we're not coming here and go back and say, yeah, you know, it's so hard and everything is horrible. I go back and say, it was amazing. I met these amazing ladies. We had the best time ever, and it was just beautiful. So I bring back beauty, and it brings good beauty to me. That's the magic that I experience.
In the years to come, PMX hopes to share that magic with even more music lovers around the world. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm John Yang in Ramallah.
First of all,
thank you.
Congratulations. That was a great feature. And it covers some of the main points about PMX, which is that it's been in existence for 3 years. You've signed on you've been able to facilitate the signing of some 28 artists and bands to different record labels. You've been able to export this idea. So it was a great summary. You want to say something before I move on to a point?
Well, the numbers are a bit inaccurate, but it's not just. I don't recall the exact number, but yeah, it's a lot of bands that we were able to export. But it's not just record deals. It's also going on tours on European stages, being booked on festivals. Toot Ard, who's a band from the Jolan, which is occupied, Syrian land, were booked. We consider them to be part of the Palestinian scene, of course. We're booked on since PMX 2017. The first time they played PMX, we're booked on 50-something shows, international gigs. So that's also a success. That's it.
No, absolutely. I wanted to, and so those numbers were, just thinking about the record deals, but exactly to facilitate an interface, which is only one dimension of what PMX is offering, which is basically a platform where you're lifting Palestinian artists to have more opportunities. But there's so much more than that. I mean, even the fact, and this goes to the fact that you're transcending these very real, juridical, political fragmentations that are placed not only, the news PBS says what Israel says is for security. Absolutely not. The purpose of these fragmentations is to prevent the cohesion of a Palestinian national identity, right? Is to prevent Palestinians from being together. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, when we first started PMX back in 2017, when we first started discussing this idea in 2015, I had this idea of doing 2 expos, one in Haifa, occupied Palestine in 48, and one in Ramallah. We decided to only do one annual event in Ramallah because we figured that we're new, we're not big enough, we're not strong enough, doing something that's, Palestine Music Expo in Israel could be traumatic maybe at the beginning. So we decided to do it in Ramallah, a place where almost all Palestinians can go to. When we introduce bands from Haifa, from Nasr, from Jaffa, we introduce them on stage from Haifa, Palestine, from Nasr, Palestine, from Jaffa, Palestine. What you said is 100% accurate and so important to us. Palestine to us is a whole. Can I just say one thing about Gaza, if you don't mind? So yeah, each year we try, each and every year we try to bring Palestinian musicians from Gaza. In 2019, it was the first time we were able to actually get Palestinian musicians from Gaza. Out of 25 musicians, only 14 were given a permit to cross Eretz checkpoint and come to Ramallah. Most of them left Gaza for the very first time in their lifetime. It was just insane. A lot of we were talking about 4 bands. The bands didn't come whole, so they had to, it's not like, the Israeli army said, okay, we want to keep this band whole and this band whole, and that's it. The other 2 bands will just stay in Gaza. So they just, like, the lead singer from this band came and the bassist from this band came. So it was and the permits were given a day before PMX 2019, a day before. So the Gaza musicians had to, like, basically be very creative. They didn't have any time to rehearse. Other musicians helped them. So it wasn't necessarily about the quality of music, but it was about the cultural and political saying of having musicians in Gaza on a Ramallah stage.
I mean, I think, you highlight some of what people might understand is obvious. And, Palestinians in Gaza aren't necessarily going to be able to visit Palestinians in Bethlehem. Yeah. And then, thinking about Palestinians in Jerusalem, which are adjacent. Yeah. People can't get to Jerusalem, but even within the West Bank, right? There are similar demarcations that prevent Palestinians from reaching one another and checkpoints that are separating Palestinians from each other. And so the idea of creating or attempting to create a cultural location to be physically together is both bringing awareness to that and also creating something new, right? I'm sure people are thirsty. I understand that in your 2018 festival, you drew an audience of 5,000 Palestinians. And that's tremendous.
We drew big crowds also in 2017. To us, it's about making music, Palestinian music, and the best bands in Palestine, the best musical acts in Palestine, accessible to all audiences, people from refugee camps, whatever. If you can make it to Ramallah, come. Tickets only cost like 20 shekels, which is nothing. In the first year, we only took 20 shekels. Then it was way too low, and we need to fund ourselves. So we only decided charging a bit more in other years. But the idea is not to make profit. The idea is to make music accessible to people.
Before we get into the idea of how difficult it is to actually generate the kind of funding necessary to support these cultural initiatives, I want to go back to the PBS video because it connects directly to our work, right? The idea of the politics of curation in Palestine. We even saw the beginning of that, right? That even PBS, as they were trying to cover this, stumbled over their language. One, their translation was wrong, and Bala Hadud becomes without walls instead of without borders, right? And even thinking about the terminology that they use, that they're limiting Palestine to the West Bank, which is even against the nature of your entire project and who you are as a Palestinian min al-Lid. So
that's the lawyer in you talking.
No, it's the Palestinian in me, right? And knowing that even in the cultural work, it is so political. It is so political. So just getting into the politics of curation and what that's meant for you as somebody who's founded this, I'm sure that there have been the politics of who you select as musical acts, the politics of having to navigate calls for cultural boycott and being, in line with the, popular calls, national calls. And so can you tell us a little bit about the challenges of how you've navigated, how you've navigated these politics and maybe how you've cultivated your own sense of what the politics should look like?
You ask a fantastic question. I'll try to be brief and accurate as possible, but there's no easy answer for this, no short answer for this. When you talk about the difficulty of of curating these things in Palestine, we need to drill down and talk about the communities that make Palestine. Well, you have the people of 67, and then you have the people of 48. These are different communities with different mentalities. And within 67 itself, you have, the villagers, and you have the people from Ramallah, from the big city. And when you talk about 67, you also talk about the people in East Jerusalem, and you talk about the people in Gaza. And you talk about 48, you talk about people like me, people who relatively have, freedom of movement, not really, but but at least we can go to the West Bank. So it's this whole thing creates a very, very complex and complicated field to work in. So just to give you a very brief example, in 2018 we had to a week before PMX 2018, the Great Return March in Gaza started. So imagine this: a week before you start the music festival, you've been busting your butt off. I mean, you've been working on it for an entire year, trying to come up with money, bringing delegates, securing flights, hotels, all that. And a week before that, the Great Return March starts in Gaza. And we had, I think, the first day they had 14 martyrs, 14 shaheed, 14 martyrs in Gaza. So how do you make a music festival a week after that? I mean, we're Palestinians. We're used to mourn. We're used to mourning. We just, like, when we have shuhada, we just close everything, and we go on demonstrations, we go on parades, we confront the army. That's what we do. We decided to go as planned to have PMX 2018, because we said what we do is complements what the Palestinians in Gaza, completes what the Palestinians in Gaza do. So our cultural activism, we call it cultural activism, but it's also cultural resistance, is part of their resistance, and what they do is part of what we do. So this was our message, and a lot of, I'm happy to say, and I'm honored to say, that a lot of our people in Gaza supported that message, and they said that seeing people on the stage in Ramallah dedicating their songs and performances to the people of Gaza was very important for them in these dire times. But some people in Gaza didn't like it, and they thought that we shouldn't be playing music while people are dying. And even within these communities, if you keep drilling down, you see that it gets even more complicated, because some of these people told us that music is haram. They don't think that, I mean, what, we're dying here and you're dying. Sorry? Yeah, so it's, and you feel like you don't want to talk to a person that says that, but they're part of your people, so it's best that you do try to communicate with these people. But how do you communicate? Sometimes it feels you're talking two different languages. So this brings another difficulty into curating these things in Palestine. And then you have the land of 48, which is a whole different thing and a whole set of problems. We've been talking about PMX, but let me share another story. About a year and a half ago, I think, almost 2 years ago, I curated an art festival here in Haifa. I'm in Haifa right now, Haifa, Palestine. The initiative was by Israelis, a group of Israelis, an Israeli theater who's funded by the Haifa municipality. Now, the Haifa municipality is basically the state. It's Israel. And they've been having, for 37 years, they've been having what they call the Arab Cultural Festival. They offered that I curate the festival. And I said, okay, I'm willing to curate with one condition. If we change the name of the festival and the content, and I meant, by changing the name, I meant to change it to Palestine Cultural Festival, Palestinian Cultural Festival, and we focus only on Palestinian original artists, not people who play Kulthum or Ferouz. With all due respect to Kulthum or Ferouz, we want to give visibility to our own artists that create their original music. And I wanted to also have Palestinian films and Palestinian music in the Israeli public space. So that's why we also had an open stage downtown in Haifa with Palestinian musicians on it, and we also played cinema there. So naturally, and this was the first time since 1948 that we were able to force the state of Israel to fund a project with the word Palestine in its title. To me, that was a massive win. I did it for that. I wanted to show Israelis that this Haifa is also our place, and Palestinian culture is part of Haifa's history and part of its past and part of its present. I'm happy to say that I found a lot of Israeli people that are willing to support that, and I found a lot of Palestinian people who are willing to support that. So naturally, we got a lot of death threats. The Israeli Minister of Culture, the Israeli Minister of Economy, they all attacked us. Some of the artists also received death threats. And you know what? I don't care about the Israeli threats, but to me, what was painful was seeing a lot of Palestinians that don't see what we see when we do that don't see that by challenging the occupation and winning, we're actually inspiring people to celebrate Palestinian culture. Because in 48, we suffer from a lot of things, and people don't know that. But it's not just the identity erasure attempts that the establishment has been, doing. They've been attempting to erase our identity since 1948. That's why they call us Israeli Arabs. And if I call myself a Palestinian, they see it as a threat. Right. So you go through these attempts. So how do you celebrate your culture when you're afraid to call yourself a Palestinian? So I wanted to challenge that and to play, in the Israelis' home court. To me, that's what taking the money meant. Well, so a lot of Palestinians didn't see it the way I saw it, and yeah, so that adds another level of difficulty.
Well, so this is complicated. And I think even at the beginning of your talk when you were saying since 1948, right? So my head goes to the Palestinians who remained, right? Because in fact, what happens to the Palestinians that remain is because of an Arab boycott and not normalization. Palestinians like you get cut off from the rest of the Arab world, right? Yep. Even that cultural exchange becomes cut off. And by the time we get to 1993, you're cut off because of the peace process, because of Oslo, as a matter of law. Now you're cut off formally and don't exist anywhere. So I think one of the main, challenges is how do Palestinians, who remained, who have relatively more freedom of movement and accessibility, as you say, are structurally disadvantaged. And how do we understand that with nuance? Because unlike, the rest of us who are adhering to cultural boycott, your circumstances are different, right? These are the hospitals that are serving you. These are the educational institutions that you must attend. So the challenge that you have in my opinion, can't merely be to boycott, right? But it has to be this duality of creating alternatives as well as demanding change of the very institutions that want you to disappear, right? And sometimes when we take black line rules and apply them without that context, we end up making this initiative that you had, which was precisely to do that, right? We suddenly make that a transgression rather than an advancement.
I also think it's what you say is 100% true, but I also think maybe I also think it's, and you and I talked about this offline in the past, I also think that we're just so used to losing all the time that when a good thing happens or a win happens, that you don't have to necessarily agree with the method. You don't have to necessarily agree with the project and be 100% on board, but you have to recognize it's a win. And sometimes Palestinians, I think, are not used to seeing a win. And that's a shame. That's a big shame.
That's a really good point, but obviously it's going to get complicated of what do we consider a win, what do we consider a resistance strategy, but even thinking about Hanin Zarbi, right? And all of the other parliamentarians, we have held them up despite the fact that they're not boycotting the governmental body that's supposed to legitimate the state, right? And so there are these contradictions amongst ourselves where I think it will require us to be nuanced. It will require us to be complex in the way that we think about this. Before I ask you the next question, I want to encourage our audience to go ahead and submit their questions in the comments. If you are on YouTube, you can click on the icon in the play bar to submit your comments so that we can get some questions from the audience as well. What, before we continue about obstacles, I want to go back to the beginning. There must be a moment you, as obviously you're an activist, you're a government aide, you're a filmmaker, and here you shifted into this moment and before 2017 to become a curator. So can you tell us about that spark, the beginning that inspired you to start this?
Well, thank you for that question. I feel like no, I feel like you're in my mind. I was about to I was just thinking about that. I started as I want to say a hardcore political activist. We were very active back in. I graduated from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, which is an Israeli academic institute. Yeah, I became a political activist there, and then when I got back to Lid, my hometown, me and my friends decided to start an activism group that was very active on Palestinian identity issue. With youth people in Lid. If you just take a quick survey. If you're in Palestine and you go to Haifa, Akka, Yafa, Lid, Ramle, and you just talk to people there and you ask them about their identity, a lot of them will say that they are Israeli Arabs, without really understanding or realizing how charged this thing is, and without realizing, and you can't blame them because a lot of them don't know their past, don't know. We're not taught in schools what happened in 1948 and where we come from and all that. So we decided to be active on these issues because if you don't know where you come from, it's very easy to manipulate you. It's so easy to manipulate you, and the Israeli establishment has been doing a tremendous job in that. So to me, this is a key point. We need to tackle identity issues in order to move forward, to liberate ourselves. If you want to liberate the mind, first you deal with identity, and that's once more people in 48 would start doing that, you'd see a massive big change, a positive change. So we became very active on that, and naturally, because we were very active in Lid, and Lid suffers from a lot of house demolition issues, we became very active on that as well. So I got arrested 3 times back then, organizing demonstrations and all that. And the thing about being an activist, and Noura, you know this, I mean, you win a struggle, but you lose 9 others. It's the trade-off is just terrible, and it's the burnout rate. It's just it's insane. I mean, you get tired. You suffer from fatigue, activist fatigue, very fast. And so in 2015, I started working on my film, a film that I'm co-directing with the amazing filmmaker Sarah Friedland, and I decided to shift to the arts because I just wanted to refresh my repertoire, to refresh my work, and then the Palestine Music Expo started, and I think there wasn't a spark, there wasn't like a moment I could say, okay, I want to start doing that now. It just happened. And after it happened, and after we had a massive success in the inaugural PMX in 2017, then we realized what we did. Then we really truly understood what cultural activism really meant. And this is when, after the fact, after we were done with the project, and we saw 30 delegates go back to the UK, go back to the States, go back to Switzerland, go back to France, go back to Germany, and go back to Korea. And spread the message of Palestinian music, of Palestinian culture, and how important it is to resist the occupation, being basically our ambassadors. Then I realized what cultural activism really meant, and I think that was the point when me and my friends said, okay, we apparently we're kind of all done with straightforward, hardcore political activism, and now we're doing cultural activism. Because also, if you think about, hardcore political activism in Palestine, it's kind of dead. Other than Gaza, people are not demonstrating anymore. Demonstrations are becoming.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
يعطيهم ألف عافية. ضحوا كتير.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've sacrificed so much.
Yeah, and you need to come up with new solutions, and you need to come up with creative means of resistance. It's not just about coming up with creative means of resistance, Noura. It's also, you wrote a book. You wrote a legal book on Palestine. So how do you tell a story that's been told in the past so many times?
So many times for 100 years.
So you have to approach it from a different angle, right? You try to be as creative and original as you can. So that's the shift to cultural activism.
Look, we're in the same boat, right? I begin like you, and even the DC Palestinian Film and Arts Festival it grows out of a hardcore political project, which is the opposition to Oslo and the opposition to the Palestinian Authority and its role in our oppression or subordination, I should say, right? And yet it grows out of that space for the precise reasons that you say. This work can be so exhausting, and some of the greatest exhaustion is when it comes from within the community and the critique and the infighting. We win one, we lose 9 times. So what sustains you and what's beautiful about cultural resistance and activism is that it is sustaining. It is imaginative. It breaks down walls rather than creates these impediment. It creates spaces of coming together. So I completely hear you on that. I want to pose some questions from the audience. You have a few questions. Let me start with a basic one, which is the PMX going to go virtual this year because of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We decided to take a year off in 2020 because also, we were kind of debating whether we should take a year off, because after you do something, you do such a thing. We've been doing that for 3 years. It's very exhausting. It's very costly, and each and every year you have to bend over backwards to come up with funding. So we decided to take a year off in 2020. We were debating whether we should take it or not, and then the pandemic happened, and we said, okay, I guess we all said we guess it's a year off. But it's becoming very, very, very hard on everyone, and I think people need the Palestine Music Expo. And now we're not so sure what's going to happen with 2021, because even if they come up with a vaccine or in this pandemic is behind us, it's an issue, because if you plan for big events, you need to have. It's hard to plan for such events. You need to start planning 6 months and a year and a half in advance. So I don't know if 2021 is happening. So maybe we will just have to go virtual. We still haven't made a decision. I personally, I'm not a big fan of virtual events. No. It is Noura, how can you have dozens of bands, just go on stage, and there's something very, very hard and very difficult in seeing this, at least for me. I'm not it's music, it's hard, it's really hard, and but maybe we were just gonna have to do that, and because people need it, I guess, and so we'll see. We still haven't made a decision.
You raise a really important point, right? Which comes into just resources, because if you were well resourced, this wouldn't be such a challenge, because you obviously the curation part, right, is not as hard as the raising the money part and convincing funders to fund this rather than to fund, for example, protection for an olive harvest or to help rebuild a home. And you have the additional challenge of you're not going to take money from the Israeli state. You're not going to take money from the Palestinian official leadership, which has been your position. And then if you think about the Arab world, there's such a hegemony on music production by Rotana, as it's almost as if there's no musical diversity. So it's not a very fertile place to think about different music. So this is how is it that you're, and I think filmmakers go through the same thing. How are you going to overcome that hurdle when you think about raising the funds? Is there a way to make it sustainable? And obviously, very obvious politics involved in that.
That's a fantastic question. And I think that's been the biggest obstacle we, as Palestinian artists, speaking as a filmmaker myself, face. We don't have a film fund. We don't have enough big funds or funds in general to support our cultural initiatives. So you have to reach out to other funds and other funders in the Middle East, and they have to, like, if you I mean, let's say you have a FAC in Beirut in Lebanon. But they fund other initiatives as well, so they're not big enough, so they can't just give money to the entire Middle East and to all of Palestine. Same thing with other funds. So we reach out to Europe and to the States, and this is where I have some good news and bad news. The good news is that I'm speaking from experience. I did a crowdfunding campaign for my film in 2018. And 50% of the people that gave us money for Linden Exile, at least 50% were Palestinians, and I was pleasantly surprised because, to be honest, I thought that more Europeans and Americans would be supporting this than Palestinians. But I mean, I saw that a lot of young people are giving money to the arts. Seeing a Palestinian donating $20. Is actually, it's way more heartwarming than seeing, although very much appreciated. But but I mean, it's just something that was a very awesome thing to see. But yet, it's a challenge. And when you have a proven project, such as the Palestine Music Expo, and like you said, we've been covered in all big media outlets in Europe. I mean, The Guardian, BBC, Le Monde in France, The Bild in Germany. Big media outlets are covering this. The PMX is making a lot of waves, a lot of noise in the music world, and we've become a very well-known festival, and we have proven ourselves. And yet, it is incredibly hard to fund our activity, and this is where it gets really tricky. And same thing, I'm talking also as a filmmaker. It becomes super tricky when you want to do your film. I mean, this is why a lot of Palestinian filmmakers, Palestinian citizens of Israel, end up reaching out to Israeli funds because they want to finish their films. They wanna. I mean, we don't want to do that, but we have to sometimes. And that's the big need for a Palestinian film fund. That's a big need for Palestinian funds to support us. Now, in the lack of these funds, of such funds, we can always ask Palestinian businessmen, Palestinians, Palestinian philanthropists, Arab philanthropists in the States, in Europe, to support the art. Because if we don't exist, I mean, if culture in Palestine doesn't exist, if art in Palestine doesn't exist, if festivals and don't exist in Palestine, trust me, Palestine itself won't exist. And that's why we keep reaching out to Palestinians in the diaspora to support us.
Rami, you are getting so many questions. So let's see how talented you are in helping to answer it. I'm going to give you a straightforward one coupled with a more complicated one. So the straightforward one is, can you provide an address of where people can listen to the work of fellow Palestinians? Is there like on Spotify or another network where people can listen to those questions? But I'm going to connect that to the question of, how has PMX changed the way that Palestinian musicians continue to connect, or have connected and continue to connect?
I think you were cutting off at the beginning. So was the question of how can people listen to music from PMX? Was it something like that?
Or to Palestinian music in general, like, as where can people? Is there an address for Palestinian music that people can listen to?
Of course, if you follow our Instagram and Facebook pages, the Palestine Music Expo, or if you go to PalestineMusicExpo.com, you'll be exposed to a lot of Palestinian musicians. Also, if you go on Spotify and you search Palestine sounds or Palestinian sounds, I think you would end up, listening to a PMX playlist, music from the Palestine Music Expo.
Is this a part of brother Sohail Nafar?
I'm sorry, Noura, you keep cutting off.
Is this a shout out to our brother Sohail Nafar?
Maybe if you want to. So I'm a big executive in Spotify, and someone we're very proud of, and yeah.
And what about how PMX has helped Palestinian musicians connect?
Well, yeah, that's another thing. The Palestine Music Expo is a place where Palestinian musicians basically connect. No, the vision is to start, PMX is just the start. Our vision is to have the Palestine Music Office, which would function as a home for Palestinian musicians throughout the year, not just like in different events that we have, whether it's workshops or webinars or mingling events. We want to create a space to all, a place where they can interact with each other, record, learn from each other, teach each other. And that's going to be the Palestine Music Office. So that's our vision, that's our dream. In the meantime, the Palestine Music Expo, PMX, has become an event you work towards. I want to release an album before PMX, next PMX, so that the delegates could hear my music. So I would have a fresh act on stage. I would have fresh tunes. So it's stuff like that, and people have been we're very proud of the fact that the Palestine Music Office has been able to make a lot of Palestinian musicians more professional in that sense.
That's great. So few more questions for you. We have a young Nigerian on the line, Enoch, who is also a filmmaker and is interested or an aspiring filmmaker, and is interested in knowing more about your films, Rami, and where they can watch that.
Well, right now we're working on a sci-fi documentary that's called Linden Exile, which shows the city of Lid, the place I grew up in. Deals with the story of Lid, what happened in 1948, how the Nakba, what happened in 1948, is still happening to the city, while creating an alternate reality in which the occupation never took place. So that's why I call it a sci-fi documentary. The movie is not out still, but if you go to lydinexile.com, you will learn more about the project. And I think I see another question from, maybe it's the same friend from Nigeria. How can we support the Palestinian cause from within the US? Can I answer that, Noura?
Yeah, who needs a moderator? Go for it.
Yeah, exactly. You're obsolete, Noura. Well, I mean, it's a very broad question. There's no easy answer for that. Just if you're asking that question, that means your heart is in the right place and you're willing to support. So opportunities will come along. Just follow our Facebook and Instagram, and if you want to support the Palestine Music Expo, we'll be more than happy to.
I want to supplement that by saying, Enoch, you can join. If you're into the art, there's also the DCPFAF, which is, can take new volunteers as well. There is, if you're more politically minded, depending on where you are locally, there might be organizations, but nationally, there's the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, and so you can join that. There's a number of different initiatives, and if not, you can even start your own BDS campaign locally, whether it be in your faith-based institution, your school institution, or your city municipal council. Rami, let me ask you the next question. I want to ask you a question posed by one of the pillars of the DCPFAF, Nada Al-Aryan, a dear sister and a pillar of the DCPFAF. She's also the executive director of Eyewitness Palestine, talking about making connections, who does that work. Nada wants to know how people can support keeping PMX and DCPFAF and other similar cultural initiatives alive, to help keep Palestinian arts alive.
That's I love it when people ask these questions, because it shows their heart is in the right place. It's obvious that Nada's heart is in the right place. She's with you guys. Well, right now it's COVID-19, so it's a big problem. And when we go to funders and ask for support, they would say, we want to support. Right now, the priority is to support initiatives that have to do with COVID-19. And it's totally understood, and of course we support that. At the same time, if projects like the Palestine Music Expo or Haifa Independent Film Festival an indie film festival that takes place here in Haifa, which is another important project. A shout out to them. If these projects are not supported again, it's a big problem. So to support these projects, just follow them. And we once a year we start a crowdfunding campaign. We reach out to people and ask them to support us. But it's not just financial support. It's also sometimes, like you said, we need volunteers. We need people to spread the word. The word. I mean, as a journalist, oftentimes I need some help with spreading the word in the US, reaching out to journalists in the US. So there's a lot of ways an individual can support. I would say that, also you can always reach out to us, send us a message on our Facebook or our Instagram, or an email through our website if you want to become a volunteer. And so it's super easy. Just reach out to us.
Rami, so there's so much more politics to wade through, obviously, but I want to end on a note of vision and creativity, because regardless of your many hats that you wear, at the end of the day, you're a visionary and a creative. And if you allow me, one of the dreams that you've actually put out in the world is to be able to create some sort of production company that can enable other creatives to produce their work. Do you want to share that dream? Put it out in the universe.
So you want me to talk about a dream?
Absolutely.
Well, it's very okay. So I would how much time have we got?
3 minutes.
Okay, so I'm gonna be very, very brief. Imagine, I mean, it's very simplistic. Imagine that you have $2 million. Imagine that you have a film fund of $2 million, right? And this film fund supports 10 films a year. It gives $200,000 a year to 10 feature films in Palestine, or short films, whatever. This would enable Palestinian filmmakers to reach out to European producers and European or American funds and match these amounts, this money, and this would elevate the Palestinian cinema scene to levels we can only dream of right now. And this is easy. This is easy. We're not talking, a lot of money here. So it's just a dream that I have. I want to sometime in the future, I want to start doing that. I know that the previous Minister of Culture, Ihab Seso, was actually working on this, but then he got replaced. So I know that a lot of Palestinians who are involved in activism and in cinema are working on such initiatives. And man, we dreamt of the Palestine Music Expo, and it happened. So this seems like a big and maybe far away thing to achieve, but I truly believe in that, and I truly believe that we can bring a lot of Palestinian philanthropists and start such a fund.
So you answered that so efficiently. We have time for one more question. And I just want to say that absolutely every dream becomes something that you're putting out for yourself or somebody else to continue. And so thank you for dreaming and for continuing to dream out loud with us. We have a question from Andrew Qadi, also a great friend, supporter, and pillar in the community, who says, Rami.
Hi, Andrew.
Rami, I know you mentioned that Palestinians are not really in the streets these days, yet I know in Haifa, some of the biggest demonstrations recently have been around queer rights. How does this complement the energy of arts and openness?
So that's a fantastic question. I was still in Boston when these demonstrations were happening, and this was before COVID. Some demonstrations actually happened this summer too, between the two waves, the first wave and the second wave. It's a struggle. It's a big issue. It's a big issue in here, and it's something that, wow, it's such a big question. There are a lot of layers to this. I mean, as a Palestinian writer who also writes mainly in Hebrew and plays in the Israelis' home field, I see my job in these events is to fend off Israelis who try to intervene and interfere and just like come into this internal discussion that we have in our Palestinian society. Now, we're all Palestinian, and we know that queer rights is still an issue here in Palestine. The Palestine Music Expo officially, supports LGBTQ rights. We come from that world. A lot of musicians are also have been openly gay, and that's. I mean, I remember in 2019 we had Bashar Murad who played PMX, and he got on stage wearing like a wedding gown. He was like dressed in white and everything. So it was very inspiring to see. And needless to say, he received a lot of threats, and it wasn't very easy to deal with. But we support him, and we support every Palestinian. That we Palestinians, we need to appreciate freedom and individual freedom. And I think that a Palestinian that tries to suppress and oppress others is basically doing what the Israelis have been doing to us, and that's what they know. So although it makes me very mad to hear homophobic comments from Palestinians, I try to handle them with sensitivity, knowing that this is this type of violence or verbal violence is embedded in us by the occupation, and by the fact that we weren't able to evolve freely as a society. So it's a very sensitive and difficult subject, and yeah. Andrew, you ask a very tough question. I can't answer this. I can't answer this in two minutes.
Everybody wants to ask you really easy things, just keep simple for you. Rami, we are actually at time, and it's obviously we've just scratched the surface of so much more, and we didn't even get into the content of the actual music that you've displayed and the genres that they touch upon and expand, and really showing the diversity of also our creative outlets. So I hope that we have more opportunities. I do want to thank you for your beautiful contributions, for the ways that you resist, for the ways that you thrive, and for the fact that you continue to dream. You're a gift to us, and I hope that we can help your dreams for all of us come true.
Thank you, Noura, and thank you for your involvement in this festival, and thank you for the people in DC who are making this possible. The more events like this, the better for all of us. And again, thank you so much for this. And I think the world of you, and it's been such an honor. And let's do this again.
Let's go. Thank you to the DCPFAF community and audience that is tuned in with us. Join us tonight for a short film program at 7 p.m. Eastern.